Hello, this is Webb Stewart. Welcome to the Deep Dive audio podcast, News and Reviews, with your host, David Meyer and Laura Wagner.
Well, thank you to the legend, Mr. Webb Stewart.
Absolutely.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Deep Dive audio podcast, News and Reviews, where we explore the stories that shape our world.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are tackling a paradox.
A bit of a riddle, really.
It is, yeah. I want you to imagine a cultural force that is so massive, so pervasive, that it basically built the infrastructure of the American town as we know it.
It's everywhere.
Literally everywhere. I mean, it shaped our university systems, it brewed our beer, it gave us the concept of the weekend.
Hot dogs, kindergarten.
Exactly. It's woven into the DNA of the country to the point where you can't really separate it from America.
And yet, here's the riddle. If you walk down the street in, say, Chicago or Cincinnati today, places that were historically huge hubs for this culture, and you ask people about their heritage,
It often feels silent.
very quiet.
Exactly. And that's what we're calling the hidden majority. Today, we're looking at German-American heritage.
And specifically, we're unpacking a really fascinating piece of research called The Case for 60 Million.
Which is a heavy title.
The content is even heavier.
Yeah.
It basically argues that what we think of as just, generic American culture is actually German culture that did such a good job blending in, we stopped noticing it.
Okay, so let's start with the baseline, just to ground everyone. If I go to the U.S. Census Bureau website right now, how many people actually put up their hand and say, I'm German?
The official self-reported number usually sits right around 40 to 41 million people.
Which, to be clear, is already huge.
It is. Even at that quote-unquote lower number, German Ancestry is the single largest self-reported European heritage group in the U.S.
Bigger than Irish, bigger than English.
Bigger than Italian. By the official books, it is the heavyweight champion.
But, and here is the mission for today's deep dive, this source argues that 40 million is actually a massive undercount.
That's the core thesis.
Mm-hmm.
The case for 60 million argues that when you account for historical assimilation, the anglicization of names, how the census actually works.
And all the geopolitical pressures of the 20th century.
Right. When you factor all that in, the real number is likely somewhere between 58 and 66 million.
60 million people. That is a staggering difference.
It really is.
That's a gap the size of, the entire population of New York State doubled.
It is. And the natural question is, how do you lose 20 million people? They didn't vanish.
No, of course not. They're still walking around, going to work.
But they vanished on paper. And to understand that, we have to look at how identity evolves. It's not about disappearance. It's about integration.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the first place this becomes visible, or I guess invisible, is in our names. The source brings up this idea of anglicization, and I found this fascinating.
Right.
It's the idea that names didn't just vanish, they were translated.
And this is one of the most powerful factors in what the source calls the quieting of the identity.
Yeah.
You have to remember the context.
Right.
German immigrants needed jobs in English-speaking factories. They needed their neighbors to be able to pronounce their names without, stumbling over 5 consonants.
So it wasn't always some dramatic, shameful rejection of the past. Sometimes it was just purely practical.
Pragmatism is the key word. It was about belonging. It was about ensuring your kids had opportunities. So simplifying a spelling is a very rational economic decision.
Okay, let's run through the examples the source gives, because these are names we see every single day. I think most of us assume a name like Miller is just quintessentially English.
Right. But Miller is often the direct translation of Miller.
You just take off the umlaut, change a letter.
And suddenly you fit in. It's one of the most common shifts.
And Schmidt
Becomes Smith.
Oh, what about Schneider?
That became Taylor. Because Schneider literally means tailor in German.
And Zimmerman.
Carpenter.
See, that's the one that always gets me. That feels like a magic trick. You hear carpenter and you just think of an English trade name.
Precisely. But you might be looking at a German lineage that just translated the dictionary definition of their name to fit in. And the consequence of that is huge.
How so?
Well, if you change an Italian name like Rossi to Ross, you kind of keep the link, right? It still sounds vaguely similar.
Sure.
But when Zimmerman becomes Carpenter, you completely break the visual and phonetic link to the past.
So like closing a door and locking it.
And the source makes a profound point here. A person named Miller today might not even realize their great-grandfather was a Muller. The roots become invisible, even to the descendants.
It's a stealth heritage. You're walking around with a deep German history, but your label says Standard American.
Exactly. And that's just the surname. The source talks about how this extends to the entire culture. I mean, in the 19th and early 20th centuries, German was massive in the U.S.
We're not talking about a few small pockets.
No, we're talking bilingual communities, German language newspapers with huge circulations, schools teaching in German, social clubs. It was a whole world.
And then the shift happens.
The quiet assimilation curve, that's the term the source uses. As time went on, English naturally replaced German in daily life. But, and this is the key, the source argues this wasn't cultural loss.
It was cultural blending.
Exactly.
I love that distinction.
Yeah.
Because the traditions didn't stop, right? People still ate the food. They still had the music, the work ethic.
Right. But they stopped labeling them as German. They just became American traditions. I mean, think about it. How many things do we do that are German in origin, but we just think of them as default American?
Christmas trees.
Exactly. The Christmas tree is the famous one, but also the Easter Bunny.
Really?
Or even the structure of the American Research University that was modeled on the German system. But we don't call it the German university system. We just call it college.
So as assimilation went up, the visibility of the heritage went down.
Even though the population, the actual number of people with that DNA, remained or grew.
Which brings us to the systemic issue. If the people are still here, why doesn't the census catch them?
Well, that's where the source argues the way we count people is just, it's flawed.
I mean, even if I'm named Miller, if I know I'm German, I'd check the box, right? Why is there this 20 million person gap?
The source argues the structure of the census and the American Community Survey is actually designed in a way that unintentionally hides German heritage.
How so?
First, it relies on self-reporting. It's not a genetic test. It's asking what you know or what you were told.
Okay, so if your family stopped talking about it 3 generations ago, you might not even have the data point in your own head.
Exactly. If the story isn't passed down at the dinner table, it doesn't make it to the government form.
That makes sense.
But here's the bigger structural hurdle. The forms usually only capture the top 1 or 2 ancestries a person writes down.
The top 2 rule.
Correct. Now, think about the history of German immigration. It started early. It's an old migration compared to, say, the waves of Italian or Eastern European immigration.
So let's play this out. If I have a German great-great-grandmother who came over in 1860, but my grandfather was Italian.
You're likely to identify with a more recent, distinct identity. The Italian heritage feels fresher, you know. Maybe you still have the recipes from your nonna.
Right.
So because German heritage is so interwoven with other European lineages,
Yeah.
English, Scottish, Irish, it often gets displaced on the form.
So if you have 4 grandparents with different backgrounds and the form says pick 2, someone's getting cut from the team.
And because German is often the oldest or the most assimilated part of the mix, it's the easiest one to leave off. You list Irish and Italian, even if the German part is a huge chunk of your DNA.
Or you just write American.
That is a massive factor. The source notes that because German heritage is so old and widespread, many people simply check American because that's how they feel. They've been here for 150 years. The German label feels like ancient history.
So you have displacement by newer groups and displacement by the American label itself.
Which creates this paradox where the group is technically the largest, but statistically it gets whittled down by the limitations of the form.
Now, we can't talk about the quieting of German identity without addressing the elephant in the room, the 20th century.
Yes, the world wars.
And the source handles this really carefully, and I want to make sure we do too. It talks about the social climate during WWI and WWI.
It does, and it approaches it with a lot of impartiality. The reality is, during those eras, public identification with German culture became less comfortable. It became less practical.
It wasn't just about feeling awkward. There were real pressures, right?
Oh, absolutely. The source notes that German language instruction declined rapidly. Before WWI, you could go to school in many states and be taught in German. That vanished.
Just gone.
Newspapers faded away, institutions transitioned to English, and families, this is the crucial part, families prioritized an English-first identity at home.
So you stop speaking German to the kids, you maybe stop emphasizing where the family came from.
And the source emphasizes that for many families, this was pragmatic, not ideological. They weren't rejecting their roots. They were prioritizing stability. They wanted their kids to be safe and to fit in.
They didn't want their children to be ostracized on the playground.
Exactly. But that has a long tail.
A generational ripple effect.
Yes. If your grandparents stopped speaking German and stopped talking about the old country in 1917 or 1942, by the time you get to the grandkids in 2024, that chain of knowledge is broken.
They don't know.
They don't know, or they know vaguely, but not enough to put it on a census form. This created a break in the continuity of identity that other groups who didn't face that specific wartime pressure didn't experience in the same way.
So it's a perfect storm. You have name changes, the natural blending of culture, the limitations of the census form, and then the specific historical pressure to just be quiet.
All pushing in the same direction.
Yeah.
Underreporting.
Which brings us back to the big number, the 60 million. If we have 40 million self-reporting, how does the source justify jumping to 60?
They use something called the heritage present model.
Okay, break that down for us. That sounds very scientific.
It's a way of calculating the population by looking beyond just who checks the box. You start with the 40 to 41 million who explicitly say, I am German.
Got it. That's our floor.
Then you add the population's loss to those factors we discussed. You estimate the number of people with anglicized surnames like Miller and Smith who don't report. You add the people who identify simply as American but have German lineage.
And you account for the top 2 reporting limits in multi-ethnic families.
Exactly. You're basically doing a forensic accounting of the American family tree.
And when you do the math,
the model suggests a range of 58 to 66 million.
that is wild.
And what's fascinating here is the perspective the source takes on this. It says, a heritage that blends successfully doesn't vanish. It multiplies.
I highlighted that quote too. It's such a different way of thinking about ancestry. Usually we think if you marry outside your group, the heritage gets diluted.
Exactly. We think of it as watering down the wine. Like if a German person marries a non-German person, the kids are less German. But this model argues the opposite. It argues that intermarriage didn't dilute German ancestry. It distributed it.
So instead of a small, isolated group of pure German Americans, you have a massive population of Americans who are part German.
Correct. German heritage didn't grow by isolating itself. It grew by becoming American. It embedded itself into the broader population. So now you have millions of people who are part German, part Irish, part Italian, part English.
They might not identify primarily as German,
But the heritage is there. It's present.
it's foundational.
That's the word. It's not a niche identity. It's a foundational block of the American demographic structure.
It really changes how you look at the concept of the melting pot. We always use that phrase, but we rarely think about what happens to the ingredients once they melt.
Right. If the cheese melts into the sauce, you don't see the block of cheese anymore. But the sauce is now fundamentally cheesy.
That's a great analogy.
That is the argument here. The German element melted so perfectly that it changed the flavor of the whole dish, but you can't see the original block anymore.
And it explains why things like beer culture, or even the way we organize our towns, feel American rather than German.
Exactly. It became the default setting.
So what does this all mean? If we step back from this deep dive, we're looking at a group that is technically the largest, yet it feels publicly understated.
It's the paradox of success, in a way. The integration was so complete that the distinctiveness faded.
But the source makes a powerful case that underreporting doesn't mean absence.
It just means adaptation.
It challenges us to rethink what American even looks like.
It really does. It suggests that the definition of American is far more German than we usually realize. It's hidden in plain sight, in our names, in our traditions, in our family trees.
It makes you wonder. The source poses this really provocative question at the end.
Yes. What if heritage visibility matched heritage reality?
Right. If Americans were encouraged to list all their ancestries on the census, not just the top 2, and if they knew the history of their anglicized names, if every Miller knew they were a Miller.
The demographic map of the United States would look very, very different.
How so?
We wouldn't see German heritage as just one of many European groups. We would likely see it as the dominant ancestral thread running through the majority of the country.
It really changes how you look at a phone book, or I guess a contacts list these days.
It does.
You realize that history isn't just in textbooks. It's hidden in the names of the people you work with and in your own silent family stories.
A heritage that didn't vanish, but multiplied. That is the big takeaway for me. It's a reminder that identity is fluid. And just because you don't see a label doesn't mean the history isn't there.
That is certainly something to chew on next time you're at a kindergarten graduation or eating a hot dog at a baseball game.
You're participating in a history that is much deeper than it looks.
Absolutely. Thanks for guiding us through the numbers and the history today. This was a real eye-opener.
Always a pleasure to dig into the data.
And to you listening, maybe take a second look at your own family tree. You might find a story there you didn't know was hiding in plain sight. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.
This is Webb Stewart. You have been listening to the Deep Dive audio podcast, News and Reviews, with David Meyer and Laura Wagner. Join us next time for another fascinating podcast that has been selected just for you. If you are listening today on YouTube, be sure to click the like button, leave a comment, and hit the notification button for upcoming podcast episodes. Until next time, good day.